Morning after the night before in Kandahar. This is where more than 40 people died, mostly women, children and innocent bystanders, after a huge bomb was detonated. In terms of civilian casualties, it's one of the worst of the present conflict. Though a hotel and shops were wrecked, the target appears to have been a Japanese construction company, hit because it worked with the government on reconstruction. There were 73 attacks on election day, but President Hamid Karzai was quick to claim the elections a success and at the weekend claim victory too.
The Afghan people dared rockets, bombs, intimidation and suicide bombs and came out to vote. Despite all of this, the people took part in the election.
Karzai's claims were premature. With 10% of votes counted, Karzai has a slight edge, with 41% against 39% for Abdullah, his former foreign minister. If that trend persists when the count is finished, not before next week, there will be a runoff.
The political struggle between now and then is going to intensify. That in turn creates an opportunity for the Taliban to stage more attacks and undermine the government further. Another thing to keep in mind is that the voter turnout in this election was very low, about 6 million. That's actually lower than last time around in the 2004 elections, which was around 8 million. So any government that comes out of this election, Abdullah or Karzai, but most likely Karzai, is going to be facing a crisis of confidence. The Taliban can then use that to stage further attacks and undermine the government even more, taking attention away from the real issue, which is the counterinsurgency. Back in 2004, when Karzai was virtually unchallenged in the presidency, he tried to resist the warlords, or at least that image. When he was in power, he got into power, reality hit a few years later, and now you see him realigning himself with these warlords because he's learned that's the only real way you can retain influence in Afghanistan. And it's one of those ironies of trying to institutionalize democracy in a government, in a country as ethnically and geographically fractured as Afghanistan. This is really a situation where the barrel of the gun has a lot more say than the voting ballot. Pakistan is looking for a way to increase its leverage again in Kabul. So right now, when Karzai is feeling quite weak, quite politically vulnerable with these elections, it makes perfect sense for Pakistan to reach out to the Karzai government, offer its services, not only its political services, but also to try and help divide and conquer the Taliban using its own strategy back at home. This is basically Pakistan's way of getting its foot back in the door in Kabul.
Of course, Pakistan's powerful neighbour India has a deep interest in all this. And in Delhi, India's Foreign Minister Somanhali Krishna reiterated India's concern at the terrorist infrastructure functioning from Pakistan and said this must be dismantled.
India is willing to cooperate with Pakistan, including addressing each other's security concerns. But the biggest impediment is and continues to be that Pakistani soil is being used by terrorists who have attacked India repeatedly, and those terrorist infrastructure has not been dismantled.
People are looking at the situation in Pakistan right now and are seeing the Pakistanis have major successes in things like the recent SWAT offensive and the recent killing of Baitullah Masood. And on one level, you can look at that and say, okay, finally, Pakistan is waking up to this jihadist threat and it's clamping down once and for all. But it's actually much, much more complex than that. The Pakistanis are focused on those militants that have posed a direct threat to the Pakistani state, militants like Baitullah Masood. But there's a whole array of militants operating within Pakistan's border right now. Many of these militants are very focused on the fight in Afghanistan or on the fight against India and Kashmir. And so those are the militants that Pakistan still can continue to use as assets. And that's really what worries India. So ironically, as Pakistan gains more leverage and more control over its own militant landscape, the threat to India actually increases.
India is, of course, in a state of high readiness, but an indication that it may be preparing for more than counter-terrorism action came this week when it rolled out the first indigenously built T-90 main battle tanks.
It's a tremendous boost to the mechanized forces to get the T-90 and now the Bhishma into our forces. It's a tremendous boost. And quantum-wise, it is something which the adversaries across the border do not have.
The word they use in Delhi for this development is gaining more teeth, a sure signal to Pakistan to do more to bring the jihadists to heel. Colin Chapman, www.stratfor.com.